Welcome to this special bonus episode of America, State by State. In our main series, we move slowly through each of the 50 states, one by one, learning their geography, history, people, and culture. But from time to time, we also pause to take a slightly different journey, one that follows a theme, a landscape, or a historic path. Today, we will travel not through a state, but along a river, one of the most important waterways in New England, and one that gives its very name to the state of Connecticut. This is the story of the Connecticut River. The Connecticut River is the longest river in New England, stretching more than 400 miles from its source in the northern woods of New Hampshire, flowing southward along the border with Vermont, then through Massachusetts, and finally across the state of Connecticut before it reaches the sea at Long Island Sound. It passes through quiet forests, fertile valleys, old industrial towns, and coastal harbors. Along the way, it has shaped landscapes, supported communities, and left a deep imprint on history. In this episode, we will not hurry. We will follow the river from its beginnings to its end, moving slowly and carefully, as if we were traveling by canoe or simply walking along its banks. We will notice the details of the land, the people who lived here in earlier times, and the ways the river has been used. We will remember that rivers are more than lines on a map. They are living systems that change over seasons, flood and recede, nourish fields, and connect distant places. Before we set off, I want to add a small reminder. As always in this series, mistakes may happen. The history of a river as old and important as this one is complicated, and different sources tell different stories. If you live along the Connecticut River, or if you know it well, I would be grateful for your comments and corrections. Your knowledge adds to the journey and helps make it more accurate for future listeners. The Connecticut River has many meanings. For Native peoples, it was a source of food, transport, and spiritual life. For early settlers, it was a route into the interior, a natural highway for trade and expansion. For farmers, its valley provided some of the richest soil in New England. For mill owners and factory workers, it provided water power that fueled industry. And for those who live by it today, it is a place of recreation, beauty, and continuity. What makes this river especially interesting is how it ties together several states. Most rivers in America belong to one state alone, or perhaps form a border. But the Connecticut River runs through the heart of New England, linking New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut in one continuous flow. It reminds us that the boundaries we draw are human inventions, while the river follows the slope of the land, indifferent to politics but deeply important to people. In the sections to come, we will visit its source in the far north, where it begins as a small stream. We will travel past the green hills of Vermont and the old mill towns of Massachusetts. We will enter the fertile Connecticut River Valley, where tobacco and vegetables once filled the fields. We will pause at Hartford, the capital of Connecticut, which grew up on its banks. And we will continue southward until the fresh water meets the salt at Long Island Sound, where the river finally joins the sea. Think of this as a quiet voyage, not a rushed tour. The Connecticut River has been flowing for thousands of years, and we will take our time to follow it. If you are listening at night, you may even close your eyes and imagine drifting downstream, with the sound of water against the boat, the forests on either side, and the steady current carrying you forward. So let us begin this Connecticut River journey, a path that is both geographic and historic, both natural and human. From its northern sources to its southern mouth, the river tells a story of New England itself. The source, New Hampshire and Vermont. The Connecticut River begins quietly, far from the busy cities and settled valleys that it will one day reach. Its source is tucked away in the far northern corner of New Hampshire, a region of forests, hills, and quiet lakes. Here, at a place called the Fourth Connecticut Lake, just south of the Canadian border, the river begins as a modest trickle of water, flowing out of a small mountain tarn. It is not yet the mighty river that will cut through farmland and carry ships. At this stage, it is a narrow stream winding its way down the slopes, gathering strength from springs and brooks. This remote northern area is sparsely populated. Moose wander through the forests, black bears roam the ridges, and loons call on the lakes. In winter, snow lies deep, and the beginnings of the river may be frozen under ice. In summer, the air is thick with the smell of pine, and the sound of water is a constant companion. To stand here at the source is to feel how all great rivers begin in small, unassuming ways. A reminder that even the largest journeys start with a single step or a single drop of water. As the river flows southward, it quickly becomes larger. It gathers water from tributaries, and soon it is strong enough to form the natural border between New Hampshire and Vermont. For nearly 250 miles, the Connecticut River will mark this line between the two states, shaping their histories and their communities. On the eastern bank, towns in New Hampshire look west across the water. On the western bank, Vermont towns look east. The river becomes not only a geographic boundary, but also a shared artery of life. Travelers moving along this stretch of the river encounter a landscape of rolling hills, farmland, and small towns. In Vermont, villages with white-steepled churches and clapboard houses sit close to the water. In New Hampshire, quiet towns spread along the hillsides. The river is broad but not yet massive, and it flows with a steady, calm current. In spring, melting snow from the mountains swells its banks, sometimes flooding the low meadows. In autumn, the valley is filled with the fiery colors of maples and birches, reflected in the water. For native peoples, this part of the river was a homeland long before European settlement. The Abenaki and other Algonquian-speaking peoples fished its waters, farmed the fertile banks, and traveled its length in canoes. They called it Quintucket, meaning long tidal river, a name that would eventually be adapted into Connecticut. The river was their highway, their source of food, and part of their spiritual world. Even today, traces of their presence can be found in place names, traditions, and archaeological sites along the river's upper reaches. European settlers arrived here later than they did in southern New England. By the late 17th and 18th centuries, towns were being founded along the upper Connecticut, both in New Hampshire and Vermont. Farming was the main livelihood, with crops grown in the fertile floodplains and livestock raised on the hillsides. The river carried logs from forests, floating them downstream to sawmills. Small ferries crossed back and forth, linking communities on both sides. The river also served as a corridor of conflict. During the 18th century, when wars between Britain and France spread to North America, the Connecticut River Valley became a contested space. Forts were built along its banks, and settlers faced raids and battles as empires fought for control. Later, during the American Revolution, the valley provided troops and supplies to the Patriot cause. The river was always more than just water. It was a channel through which history flowed. As the 19th century unfolded, the Upper Connecticut Valley became known for both farming and small industry. Towns like Hanover, home to Dartmouth College, grew into cultural centers. Mill towns sprang up where falls and rapids provided water power, turning wheels and driving machinery. Yet even as industry developed, the landscape retained its rural character. Compared to the crowded towns further south, this stretch of the river remained more open, more pastoral. The natural beauty of the upper river has long drawn travelers. In the 19th century, tourists came to admire the scenery, to fish, and to escape the heat of cities. Writers and painters described the quiet charm of the valley, its meadows and hillsides, its reflections and its light. Even today, visitors paddle canoes along its waters, hike trails near its banks, or simply sit and watch the slow flow of the current. The Upper Connecticut River is a place of calm, where time seems to move at the same pace as the water. One of the striking features of this region is how the river shapes identity. People in both Vermont and New Hampshire speak of the valley as a shared space. Though it divides the states, it also unites them. Farmers on both sides rely on the same soils and waters. Students cross the river to attend schools or colleges. Bridges connect the towns, and ferries once made the journey back and forth. The line on the map may be political, but the river creates a community that belongs to both banks. If you stand on a bridge over the river here, you may notice how quiet it feels compared to the bustle of southern New England. The water is broad but gentle. The hills roll away into the distance. Small farms and forests stretch as far as the eye can see. It is easy to forget that this same river will eventually pass through industrial towns, busy highways, and finally into the sea. At its source and in its northern course, the Connecticut River still feels like a wilderness stream, a reminder of how all things begin in simplicity. So the story of the Connecticut River starts here, with springs and streams gathering in the mountains of New Hampshire, forming a river that will flow through 4 states and centuries of history. From the quiet north, it sets out on its long journey southward, carrying with it the life of the valley, the stories of the people who have lived along its banks, and the slow, steady energy of water finding its way to the sea. The Middle Course, Massachusetts. As the Connecticut River leaves the northern hills of Vermont and New Hampshire, it grows broader and more confident. It has gathered the waters of streams and tributaries, and it now flows into the state of Massachusetts, where its valley becomes wider and its role in human history becomes more visible. This is the middle course of the river, a stretch that has long been central to farming, settlement, and industry in New England. The first impression of the river in Massachusetts is one of openness. The valley here is broader than in the north, with fertile plains on either side. Geologists tell us that long ago this land was shaped by glaciers, which carved out basins and left behind rich soil. Farmers quickly recognized the value of these meadows. For centuries they have grown crops here, and the valley has often been called the breadbasket of New England. Corn, tobacco, and vegetables thrive in the alluvial soil, watered by the river and its seasonal floods. In autumn, the fields turn gold and brown, and hay bales dot the landscape, while the river winds calmly through the middle. It is no surprise that towns grew up quickly along this fertile corridor. Springfield, founded in the 1630s, became one of the most important cities on the river. Its location made it a natural crossroads, and it grew into a center of trade and manufacturing. In 1777, during the American Revolution, the Continental Congress established the Springfield Armory here, a site that would produce weapons for nearly 2 centuries. Under the leadership of figures such as Eli Whitney and later inventors, the armory became a pioneer in mass production and interchangeable parts, shaping the course of American industry. Holyoke, another city on the river, tells a different story. In the 19th century, it was built as a planned industrial city, designed around canals that diverted the river's power into mills. The falls of the Connecticut River provided abundant energy, and soon paper mills lined the canals. Holyoke became known as the Paper City, producing vast amounts of newsprint and writing paper. Immigrants from Ireland, Canada, Poland, and later Puerto Rico came to work in the mills, giving the city a cultural mix that is still present today. Northampton, further upstream, became known not only for farming but also for education and culture. Smith College, one of the leading women's colleges in the United States, was founded here in the 19th century, adding an intellectual presence to the valley. The town also became a gathering place for writers, reformers, and artists, giving it a reputation as one of the cultural hearts of western Massachusetts. As the river flows through Massachusetts, it passes under bridges that connect the 2 sides of the valley. Some are simple crossings, while others, like the Memorial Bridge in Springfield, are grander, with arches and statues. Trains run alongside the river, carrying goods and passengers, just as they did in the 19th century when railroads transformed the region. Today, highways follow the same route, showing how the river's valley remains the natural corridor of travel through New England. But the river has also brought challenges. Flooding has been a constant presence in the history of the Connecticut River Valley. In the spring, when snow melts in the north and heavy rains fall, the river can rise quickly, spilling over its banks. The most devastating flood in recent history came in 1936, when heavy rains caused the river to overflow throughout Massachusetts and Connecticut, destroying homes, farms, and factories. Dams and levees were later built to control the floods, but the memory of the river's power remains vivid in local history. The environment of the river has also been shaped by human use. Industrial pollution in the 19th and 20th centuries left parts of the river degraded, with waste from factories and towns flowing directly into the water. In the later 20th century, environmental movements and new laws began to restore the river, and today efforts continue to make its waters cleaner and its habitats healthier. Fish such as shad and salmon, once abundant, are now part of restoration programs, and bald eagles, once rare, have returned to nest along the valley. Travelers through this part of the river often remark on the mixture of beauty and industry. You can stand on a hill and look out over fields, forests, and the shining water, and yet also see smokestacks, bridges, and cities. The valley holds both the natural charm of New England and the evidence of centuries of work. It is this mixture that gives the Connecticut River in Massachusetts its special character. It is both a pastoral landscape and an industrial corridor, both a place of farming and of factories. Culturally, the Middle Connecticut Valley has also been a center of reform and change. In the 19th century, it was home to abolitionists who campaigned against slavery. Later, it became a hub of women's education and activism. The River Valley nurtured not only crops and industry, but also ideas and movements that influenced the wider nation. If you drift down the river by boat in Massachusetts, you pass from quiet stretches of farmland to the hum of cities, from the smell of fresh-cut hay to the sound of trains and traffic. The river ties all of this together. It has been a lifeline for farmers, a source of power for mills, a pathway for fish and wildlife, and a setting for human stories of struggle and success. By the time it leaves Massachusetts, the Connecticut River has fully grown into a major waterway. It is no longer the narrow stream of its northern source, but a broad and powerful river, carrying the history of the valley with it as it moves south. Ahead lies the state of Connecticut itself, where the river will give its name, feed its farms, and flow past its capital before finally reaching the sea. Entering Connecticut, the valley and the farms. As the Connecticut River leaves Massachusetts and crosses into the state that bears its name, it enters a landscape that has long been shaped by its waters. This is the Connecticut River Valley, broad and fertile, where the river has carved out rich floodplains that have sustained people for centuries. Here, the connection between land, water, and human life is perhaps more visible than anywhere else along the river's length. The valley in Connecticut is wider than in the north, and the river itself flows with a slower, more measured pace. On either side stretch fields and meadows, once covered by forests but long since cleared for agriculture. For native peoples, this valley was a source of abundant food. Fish from the river, corn and beans from the soil, and game from the woods. For European settlers, it became a place of farms and towns, with the river providing both water for crops and a highway for trade. Even today, the Connecticut River Valley is known for its fertile land, and farms remain a familiar sight. One of the most distinctive crops grown here has been tobacco. In the warm, sandy soils of the valley, farmers discovered that shade-grown tobacco thrived, especially the kind used for cigar wrappers. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, Vast fields were covered with white cloth tents that protected the plants from the sun, producing delicate leaves prized in markets around the world. Immigrant labor, including many from Puerto Rico in the 20th century, worked these fields, and tobacco became part of the cultural landscape of the valley. While the industry has declined, tobacco barns, tall and weathered, still stand as reminders of this agricultural heritage. Other crops have flourished too. The valley has long produced vegetables, fruits, and dairy products for nearby cities. Apple orchards spread across the hills, and in autumn, families come to pick apples and drink fresh cider. Corn and hay fill the fields in summer, while dairy farms provide milk and cheese. Farmers' markets in towns across the valley connect these traditions to modern life, offering local produce and continuing the link between river and livelihood. The towns along this stretch of the river reflect both their agricultural roots and their connection to the water. Middletown, for example, began as a farming and shipping town and grew into a small industrial city. Today it is also home to Wesleyan University, adding an intellectual and cultural presence to the valley. Smaller towns like Glastonbury and Wethersfield retain historic centers with colonial houses, churches, and town greens. Walking through these towns gives the sense of a long continuity, where the river has always been part of daily life. The river itself is not only a backdrop, but a participant in this life. It floods in spring, depositing fresh silt on the fields, and in summer it reflects the green of the trees and crops. In autumn, the valley glows with color, and in winter the river may freeze along its edges, with snow covering the farms. These rhythms remind us that human activity here has always been tied to the natural cycles of the river. The Connecticut River Valley also became a corridor of culture and ideas. In the 18th century, Hartford and other towns along the river were centers of political thought and debate. Writers, preachers, and reformers traveled the valley, spreading ideas that would shape both the state and the nation. In the 19th century, the valley became home to inventors and educators. In the 20th century, it welcomed immigrants who added their traditions to the mix. The river, always flowing, connected these communities and allowed their cultures to blend. Travelers along the river in Connecticut notice how the valley seems to combine openness with intimacy. The broad fields give a sense of space, but the towns and farms are close enough that the landscape never feels empty. The river winds through bends and oxbows, sometimes hidden by trees, sometimes opening into wide views. Bridges cross it at regular intervals, linking east and west, but the sense of a continuous valley remains. Recreation has also become part of the valley's identity. Canoeing, kayaking, and fishing are common, with the river offering quiet stretches for paddling and spots where anglers cast their lines for bass, shad, and trout. Parks and trails follow the water, giving residents and visitors a chance to walk or cycle along its banks. Festivals celebrate the river and its heritage, reminding people that it is both a natural and a cultural treasure. Economically, the valley has shifted from purely agricultural to more mixed use. Factories once lined parts of the river, though many have closed or changed function. Today, the valley is home to small businesses, farms, universities, and commuter towns. Its proximity to Hartford, New Haven, and even New York City gives it a dual character: part rural, part suburban, part historic, part modern. The Connecticut River Valley has also been a place of memory. Old cemeteries hold the graves of colonial settlers. Museums preserve tools, clothing, and documents from earlier centuries. Barns and farmhouses, some still in use, tell of generations who worked the land. To walk through this valley is to see not only the present, but also the past layered into the landscape. As the river continues southward, it grows broader still, preparing to pass through the state capital and then toward the sea. But in this middle stretch of Connecticut, the valley and the farms remain central. They remind us that rivers are not only about water, but also about the soil they enrich, the crops they sustain, and the communities they shape. So in entering Connecticut, the river shows us a quieter, more pastoral face. It is a place of fields and barns, of orchards and tobacco sheds, of small towns and historic greens. It is a reminder that even in a modern state, the ancient partnership between river and land continues. And as the water flows gently past, it carries with it the memory of all those who have lived and worked in this valley, shaping it and being shaped by it in return. Hartford, the capital on the river. As the Connecticut River winds its way further south through the fertile valley, it reaches one of the most important places along its course, the city of Hartford. This is the capital of the state of Connecticut, a city whose history and identity are bound closely to the river that runs beside it. To understand Hartford is to see how a river can shape not only the land around it, but also the fortunes of a community and the role that community plays in a larger story. Hartford began as a settlement in the 1630s, when English Puritans moved from Massachusetts Bay to the rich meadows along the Connecticut River. They saw that the soil here was fertile, watered by seasonal floods, and that the river itself provided a highway for travel and trade. The town grew quickly, and it became one of the central places in the colony of Connecticut. The Fundamental Orders of 1639, sometimes called the first written constitution in the Western world, were adopted here, giving Hartford a claim to be one of the birthplaces of constitutional government. The river made this possible, because without it there would have been no fertile valley to attract settlers and no easy means of connection to other towns. In the centuries that followed, Hartford became both a river town and a center of commerce. Flatboats and later steamboats carried goods along the Connecticut River, linking Hartford to Springfield in the north and to the coastal ports in the south. Farmers brought their crops to the city, merchants sold imported goods, and the river became the artery of an economy that tied the countryside to the growing town. Warehouses, docks, and mills lined the waterfront, and the hum of trade echoed across the valley. By the 19th century, Hartford was no longer just a market town. It had become a center of industry and innovation. Factories made tools, firearms, and machinery, and the river provided both power and transport. But perhaps the industry most associated with Hartford was insurance. The city became known as the insurance capital of the world, with companies such as Aetna and the Hartford taking root here. This industry grew out of the risks of trade, shipping, and industry, and over time it expanded into life insurance, health insurance, and other forms of financial security. To this day, the insurance industry remains a defining feature of Hartford's identity. The river also helped shape the cultural life of the city. In the 19th century, Hartford attracted writers, reformers, and intellectuals. Mark Twain, whose real name was Samuel Clemens, lived here for many years, writing works such as The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. His house, a distinctive mansion with turrets and dark wood, still stands near the river and is now a museum. Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, also lived in Hartford, and her home is preserved as well. The presence of these writers made Hartford a cultural hub, a place where literature shaped national conversations, particularly about slavery and social change. Yet Hartford's story has not been only one of prosperity. Like many cities in the Northeast, it faced challenges in the 20th century. Industry declined as factories moved away, and the economic base of the city shifted. The insurance industry remained strong, but manufacturing jobs disappeared, leaving many residents without stable employment. Suburbanization also changed the city, as families moved out to surrounding towns, leaving Hartford with a shrinking tax base and growing social problems. Poverty, inequality, and disinvestment became part of the city's reality, even as wealth remained nearby in the suburbs. The river itself changed too. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Hartford's waterfront was a bustling place of docks and warehouses. But floods were always a threat. In 1936, a devastating flood swept through Hartford and other parts of the valley, destroying homes and businesses. 2 years later, in 1938, a hurricane brought more destruction. In response, levees and flood control systems were built, cutting off parts of the city from direct contact with the river. Today, while the river still flows beside Hartford, it is not as central to daily life as it once was, hidden behind floodwalls and embankments. Still, Hartford remains deeply connected to the Connecticut River. Parks and walkways have been developed along the water, giving residents and visitors a chance to reconnect with it. Rowing, boating, and fishing bring people onto the river. Festivals celebrate its heritage. And when people think of Hartford, they still picture the wide ribbon of water flowing past, a reminder of the city's origins and its enduring presence. Education and culture continue to be part of Hartford's identity. Trinity College, founded in 1823, is one of the leading liberal arts colleges in the country. The Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art, established in 1842, is one of the oldest public art museums in the United States, with collections of European masters, American art, and contemporary works. These institutions sit near the river, part of the fabric of a city that has long combined commerce, culture, and community. For visitors, Hartford offers a mixture of history and modern life. Walking through downtown, one can see historic churches and state government buildings alongside glass office towers. The Connecticut State Capitol, with its golden dome, stands in Bushnell Park, a reminder of the state's political heritage. Nearby, the homes of Twain and Stowe give a sense of the literary past. And just beyond the downtown core, neighborhoods reflect the cultural diversity of the city, with communities of Puerto Rican, African American, and immigrant families adding to the mix. Hartford is, in many ways, a mirror of the Connecticut River itself. It has moments of calm and beauty, and moments of turbulence and challenge. It has carried commerce and culture, supported life, and witnessed hardship. It has been both a connector and a divider, both a source of pride and a reminder of vulnerability. To see Hartford from the river is to see a city that has grown, struggled, and endured, always tied to the flow of water beside it. As the Connecticut River leaves Hartford and continues southward, it carries with it the memory of the capital. The laws written here, the books published here, the ships once loaded at its docks, and the people who have lived and worked along its banks. Hartford is not the beginning of the river, nor its end, but it is one of the most significant stops on its journey, a place where the river and the state's story come together in one. Down to the Sound, the river meets the sea. As the Connecticut River leaves Hartford, it continues its steady course southward through the state that carries its name. The water, having begun as a trickle in the northern woods of New Hampshire, has now gathered the strength of hundreds of tributaries and valleys. It flows wide and calm, curving through meadows, towns, and marshes, before finally reaching the broad expanse of Long Island Sound. This last stretch of the journey, from the capital city down to the sea, is one of transformation. From river to estuary, from fresh water to salt, from inland landscape to coastal horizon. Along this lower course, the river passes through towns whose histories are intertwined with the water. Middletown, once a bustling port, still reflects its maritime heritage. In the 18th and early 19th centuries, Middletown was one of the most important trading centers in New England. Ships sailed from its docks, carrying rum, molasses, and other goods in a trade that reached across the Atlantic. Wealthy merchants built grand houses overlooking the river, some of which remain today as reminders of that prosperous era. Though the age of tall ships has passed, Middletown still looks to the water, and festivals and events celebrate the river's role in the town's life. Further south, the river flows past small towns and villages that have long depended on its waters. Essex, for example, is a charming town on the river's edge, known for its shipbuilding history. In the early 19th century, shipyards here produced vessels that traveled the world. During the War of 1812, Essex was even attacked by British forces, who burned ships in its harbor. Today, Essex is quiet, with tree-lined streets and historic homes, but the memory of its maritime past remains vivid. Visitors come to ride the Essex steam train, which winds along the river, and to take riverboat cruises that show the scenery from the water's perspective. Old Saybrook marks the place where the Connecticut River finally meets Long Island Sound. This town, one of the earliest English settlements in the region, has always had its life shaped by the meeting of river and sea. The marshes, beaches, and tidal flats here form an estuary, where fresh water mixes with salt, creating one of the most productive ecosystems in New England. Birds gather in the marshes, fish spawn in the brackish waters, and the tides shape the rhythm of life. For centuries, people have come here to fish, to farm oysters, and to build boats. Today, Old Saybrook is also known as a summer destination, with cottages, inns, and beaches attracting visitors who want to enjoy the shore. As the river approaches its mouth, it spreads into broad marshes and tidal channels. The Connecticut River estuary is recognized as a place of international ecological importance, part of a network of wetlands that support migratory birds along the Atlantic Flyway. Bald eagles, ospreys, herons, and countless smaller birds can be seen here, feeding and nesting in the marshes. The estuary also supports fish populations, including species that migrate between ocean and river, such as shad and striped bass. This blending of fresh and salt water creates a rich, dynamic environment, one that reminds us how rivers are not only human highways but also lifelines for nature. The river itself does not simply end but transforms. At its mouth, the Connecticut River flows into Long Island Sound, a broad body of water that connects to the Atlantic Ocean. Here, the story of the river joins the story of the sea. Tides move in and out, salt water mixes with fresh, and ships pass by, heading for harbors on both the Connecticut and New York shores. From this place, the river's waters eventually disperse into the ocean, joining currents that travel far beyond New England. For people, this lower stretch of the river has always been a place of transition. Farmers in the valley brought their goods down to these ports, where ships carried them away. Fishermen harvested oysters, clams, and fish from the estuary. Shipbuilders crafted vessels that sailed to distant lands. And travelers arriving from the sea found their way inland through this watery gateway. The river mouth was both an ending and a beginning, a place where journeys converged. In modern times, the lower river is also a place of leisure and recreation. Sailing, kayaking, and birdwatching are popular activities. The marshes of the estuary draw naturalists and photographers. Summer brings festivals, seafood dinners, and long days on the water. Even for those who are not thinking of history or ecology, the simple act of watching the sun set over the river as it meets the sound can be a powerful reminder of the beauty of this place. And yet, the history is never far away. Old Saybrook recalls its colonial beginnings. Essex remembers the Night of Fire during the War of 1812. Middletown still carries the marks of its era as a major port. The river has flowed past all of this, steady and constant, while the human world has changed. To stand at the edge of the river's mouth is to feel the long continuity of time. The thousands of years of indigenous life, the centuries of European settlement, the generations of farmers, sailors, and builders, all tied together by the same flowing water. So the Connecticut River, having traveled more than 400 miles from the northern lakes to the southern shore, finally meets the sea. Its journey is complete, but its waters continue, spreading into the Atlantic, part of the larger circulation of the earth. For those who live along it, the river is both ordinary and extraordinary, a familiar presence in daily life, and also a reminder of the great cycles of nature and history. The river's legacy. We have now followed the Connecticut River from its quiet beginnings in the northern lakes of New Hampshire, along its winding path between Vermont and New Hampshire, through the fertile valley of Massachusetts, and into the state that bears its name. We have drifted past farms and meadows, through towns and cities, and finally arrived at the wide marshes and tidal waters where the river meets the Sound and joins the sea. At each stage, the river has revealed a different face. Narrow and fresh in the north, broad and fertile in the middle, industrial and cultural in the cities, and calm and tidal as it reaches its end. What remains constant is the way the river has shaped life. For indigenous peoples, it was a source of food, a route of travel, and a spiritual presence. For settlers, it was fertile land, a natural highway, and a boundary that defined communities. For farmers, it enriched the soil. For mill owners, it turned the wheels of industry. For merchants, it carried trade. For writers and thinkers, it provided inspiration. For modern residents and visitors, it offers recreation, beauty, and a reminder of continuity. The legacy of the Connecticut River is not only historical but ongoing. Its valley remains one of the most productive agricultural regions in New England. Its waters still power industry, though in new forms. Its estuary is a vital ecological habitat, protected and studied for its role in sustaining birds, fish, and other wildlife. Its scenery draws tourists, hikers, and artists who continue to find meaning in its landscapes. In each of these ways, the river continues to connect past, present, and future. It is also worth remembering that the river has not always been gentle. Floods have swept away towns, storms have reshaped its banks, and pollution has threatened its health. Yet people have responded with levees, with conservation, with restoration. The river's story is not only about what it has given, but also about how people have learned to respect it, to protect it, and to live alongside it in ways that recognize its power. Perhaps what is most striking is how the Connecticut River ties together 4 different states, weaving them into a single natural corridor. It reminds us that boundaries on maps are human inventions, while the river itself follows the lay of the land. It connects distant places, forests in the north, cities in the middle, and marshes in the south, into one continuous whole. To follow the river is to see New England as a connected region, bound together by water. As this journey comes to a close, imagine standing at the mouth of the river, watching its waters spread into Long Island Sound. Behind you lies more than 400 miles of valleys, towns, farms, and forests. Ahead lies the open sea, carrying the river's waters into a vast and endless horizon. The Connecticut River is at once local and global, modest in scale compared to the great rivers of the world, yet deeply significant in the lives it has touched and the history it has shaped. Thank you for joining this quiet journey along the Connecticut River. I hope it has given you both knowledge and calm, and perhaps a sense of how even a single river can tell the story of a whole region. If you know the river well, if you live along its banks, or if you have memories of traveling it, I invite you to share them in the comments. Your stories add to the flow, just as each tributary adds to the current. And with that, we close this bonus episode of America, State by State. Until next time, may the steady current of the Connecticut River remain with you, a reminder of history, of nature, and of the quiet power of water making its way to the sea.